Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for hosting us and having us in your homes or your devices, wherever you're watching us. Mike Suleiman, South Jersey Ford. We're a nonprofit think tank and advocacy organization. Really excited to have another virtual roundtable with some great experts here. We just had one, as you may have seen, on North Jersey casinos and the threat of North Jersey casinos. So we're really excited there. Make sure you visit stopnorthjerseycasinos.com. Continue our advocacy there. But our next one is really about the city of Camden, the great resurgence that city has had, particularly in the fields of housing and education, how those two intersect. So we're really excited to talk about it. Appreciate our expert panelists for coming on here. Tamika Mason, who is the executive director of One Camden, and Nick Cangelosi. I knew I was going to screw that up. It was fine before, Nick, and we were recording. I screwed up. Nick Cangelosi, regional vice president of development of the Michaels organization. Thank you so much both for coming on and really contributing to our research. As I was saying to you all before we started recording, we focus a lot on housing here at South Jersey Ford, particularly in Atlantic City, and but all of our urban areas, right? Camden, Newark, Patterson, Atlantic City. We need to certainly, tackle housing insecurity as well as certainly focus on education and educational opportunities for our at-risk youth in particular, which Tamika has worked on. And I just see in Camden, the cooperation, right? You have city, county, state, private sector partners, nonprofit sector, all working together. I look at Atlantic City, my dear home, right outside. Not as much, and other urban areas, not as much as the state. But you guys and ladies certainly have the secret sauce, and I think that's a testament to your work, Tamika, in the nonprofit sector. Certainly, Nick, your work in the private sector, but just all levels of government and business working together, which is unusual. I'm sure you all fight behind the scenes, but publicly, you really do a great job to work. So, Tamika, before we get started, tell us a little bit about One Camden. Obviously, you do great work to help the kids and the youth here in Camden and help them select their schools. But tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, One Camden has been around, I think, now for 15 years. We launched originally back in 2014 for the 2014-15 school year, and it's a unified enrollment platform. We have all of our schools, different school types. We have our traditional schools, we have our Renaissance schools, our charter schools, and we also include pre-K. And it's just an access point, equitable access point for our families to navigate the educational landscape here in the city.
Well, that's great, Tamika. Appreciate to pick your brain today, and certainly Nick, the Michaels organization has certainly been doing great work. I looked at your website map earlier today, and I don't think there isn't a community you haven't touched, not just in New Jersey, but all over the country, which is remarkable. So, tell us about the Michaels organization, particularly your roots in Southern New Jersey.
Yeah, Michael, appreciate it. And thanks for having us. Really excited to be a part of this conversation. Believe it or not, Michael, we actually started in Atlantic City, where you are, about 54 years ago. I say we're probably one of the only real estate integrated companies in the country that develop everything from deeply subsidized communities to Class A, 40-story towers in Brooklyn, New York, and everything in between. We own 18 military bases. We own about 100,000 homes in close to 40 states and 700 plus communities. And, we're fully integrated. So what that means is we do everything from the entitlement work on the front end development to the construction to the management. We also raise equity and debt. We have a social service platform. We have a procurement arm helping to source business products, et cetera. But the real story for this particular session is, South Jersey's our home. It's where our headquarters are. About 7 years ago, we really decided to put our money where our mouth is and moved our national headquarters to Camden City. And we're deeply committed to the continued growth of our hometown. And so we're really excited to have this conversation today and talk a little bit about what we're doing and how incredible Camden City is in the future, how bright it's continues to be.
No, it's really great, and it's really I think when I think of urban redevelopment in New Jersey, I think of two cities, Camden and Asbury Park, and I think both really are unique models, not only just for Atlantic City, but for all of our other communities where you do have that synergy happening. And I would also say too, it clearly wasn't overnight, right? It wasn't just turn on a switch or change a couple things, and here we are. This took years and years, and Michael's been around for quite a long time, and Tamika's advocacy effort, particularly education sector, that's been really 15 years when Camden really got serious on reforming the education system there, right? So I would say everybody listening, watching, policymakers, this idea that anything's a panacea or is going to change tomorrow is not the case, right? It takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. But let's kind of go back. Let's 10, 15 years ago, Camden, Tamika, obviously you are, I think a lifelong resident, still live there to this day, a product of North Camden. And, where do you think those kind of inflection point was where, everybody collectively, government, the business sector, nonprofit said, okay, we've had challenges for years and years and years. When are we going to kind of quarterback efforts? Was it, I know a lot was made of President Obama's visit in 2015, but when was it years ago of like, okay, this is the inflection point. Let's start, coming together. Or there are several things that kind of led up to that, the success we see today.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, the point of inflection was when Camden began to move from the state of crisis in a response to more of a coordinated investment. And as you said, like collaboration is the name of the game as far as Camden. And education, that showed up. It showed up more intentional as we looked on school quality, as we looked on school choice, as we looked on family access, and all of that, comes to housing stability as well. And again, it's just about access and equitable access. And One Camden has been the centerfold of what that looks like as far as having that infrastructure where we're collaborating with the different schools, we're collaborating with the different nonprofits, just the community, the parents, the residents. We all came together as a collective to really address what that feels like and looks like as far as school quality. And One Camden was established off of that, was based off of that. And the real turning point was when the city began again creating structures that gave residents a pathway into opportunity, again, into access. And I think that is where the inflection came, back in 2016 up until today. It's just really a collaborative effort in all avenues of quality of life. What does that look like? And we've seen it, we heard it from parents, and education was a part of that. It was the fundamental piece to, just a good community.
Well, and Nick, to certainly chime in. I always say with maybe because I worked in government and politics and been around. I think a lot of folks, especially elected officials, they kind of have their buckets. Like if you're focused on housing policy, just in and of itself, housing, you're a housing developer. Housing policy or education. Let's talk education policy and like all these neat little boxes. But a lot of these issues are not neat little boxes, right? I mean, if you are housing insecure, your children are going to suffer on their academics and vice versa. And the intersection of all these issues of economic development, housing, jobs, education. And, when you're a developer, you're looking to go into a community like Camden and build. I mean, it's kind of that chicken or the egg problem, right? It's just, you all really in the success at Camden, it's kind of started from scratch, right? Some point somebody in the private sector had to take a risk and hope a project or housing redevelopment worked, right? And you guys did it. But talk to us about how that's been over the years with the Michael organization, that you really, you took risks, quite frankly, and so far it's paid off, which is tremendous.
Yeah, look, I think you nailed it. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what we do. We manage risk, and we allocate capital, and we invest in communities, right, that we see potential in. And I think what you were mentioning about in terms of inflection points, when we evaluate opportunities, you really look at how you de-risk those investments, right? And when you see the core of this city in terms of its eds and meds, when you see Rutgers University, you see Rowan University, you see Cooper University Hospital, you see Virtual Health, like these are, some of the premier anchor institutions in the region, and they're here and they're thriving. And so, the ability to kind of think about housing investment in partnership with those key anchor institutions and medical and education facilities is incredible, right? And so we don't think of ourselves as housing, right? We look at us as in the people business, and what housing is. It's really a vehicle to help promote stability. It's how to promote long-term, generational wealth for folks to be able to live in communities where they thrive. So when we think about the city and we think about its leadership, I think that's critical, because your earlier point, Michael, about it doesn't happen overnight. You're right. I think at one point, a couple decades ago, the pain for the city to stay the same was more than the pain to change it, right? And that's really where you start to see change. And you hear stats about the crime that occurred here and some of the poverty. I mean, look at last summer. I mean, there was zero homicides, right? I mean, where this city has gone and the tough decisions that are made when the mayor and when the county stepped in and said we're going to change the police force, right? And what that has done, and we're going to look at schools a little differently, as Tamika knows very well, right? The public school system was just not yielding the results that they desired, and so they thought about Renaissance schools and charter schools. And now you're starting to see some of the highest academic scores in math and English, and then you couple that with with quality housing. I mean, you really start to change the self-esteem of families. You really start to see communities thrive, right, in terms of attendance in schools that Tamika knows. I mean, she has all these stats, and you see that occur, and you start to see, those that have health outcomes, they start to increase through the social determinants of health by building housing with Virtua, which we recently did, the partnerships with the school. But it's all intentional, right? All of this were really kind of collaborative, tough decisions early on that then brought all these institutions together. And what you'd say about Camden City too, and kudos to Dana Red and her team at the Camden Community Partnership. And go ahead, Mike.
No, go ahead, Nick, please.
Yeah, you just think about when you said, hey, what are we looking at from housing developers? It's really predictability. And when you have entities that bring all of the key stakeholders together, from the water purveyors to sewer purveyors to Camden municipal government to the schools to the utility companies, all in one organization that are all aligned for the future of this amazing city and the residents, it creates predictability. Because when anybody goes from a real estate developer to a business, to a school, when you have everybody rowing in the same direction and all kind of coming together monthly to discuss what are some of the opportunities, it provides full predictability in terms of where you're going, when you're going. And that's key in terms of the last couple years and last decade or so of investment and how the city's just thrived as a result of it.
Tamika, go for it. I know you want to jump in there.
Oh, no, I was going to add to the point of how it all just synergizes. We say like the strongest developments don't just house families, right? They connect families with opportunity. And I think Michael's has done a great job as coming in as developers and being able to connect families, the residents, to opportunity. And he mentioned very quickly about the Oliver Station over there near Ferry Avenue. And so being able to partner with institutions like our medical facility, Virtua, and then also having housing there for our senior residents, it just connects the families and the residents with opportunities. And I think that, again, as we're building, as we're developing, as we're redeveloping, that is what is not leaving anyone left behind. A lot of times when we see developments, redevelopments in communities, a lot of folks feel as though they're left behind, and whatever that looks like in education and housing and economic development. And what we've been able to do is synergize that so no one feels left behind. Everyone feels like they're contributing to the growth of Camden. As you mentioned, I've been a lifelong resident here. I've seen the transition. I was here. I grew up in the 80s where you've seen the flooding of different drug sets and different violence, and to be able to actively see, the difference and to be a part of that, that's what we're looking for the future. We still have our youth, and our youth should be able to feel as though they also want to be a part of the future of the growth of Camden.
Yeah, and I look at first. I think it's only a couple years old now. The first time you have right on the waterfront a hotel, which was probably unthinkable a few years ago, right?
I mean, it was all trees and everything there. The kids, when we were kids, we would sneak over there. Our parents didn't want us to go over there. They had the water, the river over there. So to be able to see a park and to walk my dog around that area, and then to sit and have lunch or do a meeting right on the Hilton by the waterfront. No, we never would have imagined that, and I think that is what is most important in all of this, especially for those that were born and raised in Camden, and to see that and to have the access, again, not feeling left behind, we're a part of that. We can actually come and do the same things that we were doing with a better view.
I like that. So talk to us about, you mentioned education, just for those folks who aren't aware. And I always say one of our goals is to not talk over everybody's heads, bring it to the average folk that can appreciate and get on board with good public policy. So you talk about Renaissance schools, a relatively new phenomenon that's unique to Camden. So you talk about what a Renaissance school is and how One Camden fits into that model in terms of getting, kids the quality education they deserve.
Yeah, I mean, we started with a parent group again back 15 years ago, where we had advocates and leaders in the community that really wanted to voice from the parents' perspective on, as Nick mentioned, where we were at that point, and just low graduation rates, just low test scores, just all around, just underperforming compared to other districts in the state. And so we had a parent group that really advocated for more quality schools. And so with that, we already had the rise of charter schools. And again, just providing other options outside of the traditional schools for parents. And then we added on the Renaissance schools through the Urban Hope Act. And the Urban Hope Act allowed these Renaissance schools that are like a hybrid. They have private funding, but they also get state funding as well. And they are primarily placed in a neighborhood where they can provide, again, another option other than a traditional school right in their neighborhood. So our families that live in the area where you have these Renaissance schools, they're receiving priority neighborhood preference into those schools. Again, it's about school options. It's about access. I grew up in Camden, and as I mentioned before, and I went to the school. So I went to Cooper's Point Family School, which was about 8 blocks from my address. However, my actual neighborhood school was 2 blocks up. And so my family, back in that time when we didn't have One Camden, a one-point access for families to learn about the different school options, my mom was savvier. She was in education, and she was able to have the access to kind of go and venture on what other opportunities she could pursue as far as education for our kids. Wanted to feel safe, right? Wanted to make sure that we were getting the education. And again, just overall safety and quality education was what was on my mom's mind. And so we were able to go through what they called back then a special transfer process. Again, not accessible for everyone. If you were savvy, if you knew someone, you had the access to be able to choose and select your school. And so again, I went to a school that was not my neighborhood school. Then in high school, I went to what we called a magnet school, Dr. Charles Abram Medical High School. And that was more geared to like your, medical, your science, more geared into those areas. And so again, it wasn't our traditional high schools. I did practice choice. Again, went through an application process, went through a whole interview process to be able to get into that magnet school, but it allowed an opportunity for school options. And I think when we empower parents to be able to have options and to pick, their options and what's best for their kid, we see better results in kids actually being stable in that school environment and fully going through that school and graduating from that school. What with One Camden, what we've done is we've seen all of these different school options. We see the Renaissance schools, we see the charter schools and the regular traditional schools. We have our pre-K programs. And can you imagine a parent that's just new to the city or just having a new baby and ready to put their kid in the school? I mean, it's difficult to navigate all that. We had about 50 different schools that a parent had to navigate. And if they had multiple children, then you're trying to figure out, how to find the right school for each of your children. One student may have a special needs. One student may be in pre-K. So you just have these different scenarios that it's not a one-size-fit-all model as far as education. And parents should be able to feel empowered to be able to select their school's, journey in the educational landscape of Camden. That's what One Camden is. It's an infrastructure. We worked with all of the schools. We have a board that is made up of all the representatives, 2 of representatives from each of the sectors. And we come together and we build the policy, and we just collectively discuss how we're going to move forward with being able to continue and providing this access to our families. And we were able to not just have where they're accessing and there's an application process, we've been able to really evolve the system where they're registering. So they go from accessing and learning about the different school types to actually applying and then actually registering and fully enrolling into the school of their choice. And there's no other system in the country like it. We have other unified enrollment platforms throughout the country, but one Camden, in Camden City, we actually have a full suite. Parents are able to upload their documents. And so we're meeting families where they are, as opposed to, families having to go and find the information. And that has stabilized our educational sectors.
Well, you talk about it, just the unique challenges that we have in urban areas, right? Especially in the state of New Jersey, that frankly, have been neglected, haven't gotten, you would argue, the support they've needed from Trenton. Have had some like you mentioned in Camden earlier, maybe had some leadership issues that did not help things. Lord knows we know about that in my neck of the woods. But just the differences that a urban area, and certainly Nick, looking at the development side of things. I mean, it's a lot easier. Well, I shouldn't say that. There are different circumstances to develop a housing project in the suburbs, right? I mean, I saw on the map you did one right near me in Egg Harbor Township. So developing Egg Harbor Township or Galloway, where I live, or Cherry Hill, that's has a different set of challenges, maybe a little easier, frankly, than developing Camden, Newark, Patterson, Trenton, et cetera. So talk to us about this unique challenges from a development perspective, generally for a city like Camden that it either has currently or just historically had, and how that's different from Cherry Hill, EHT, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's a great question. So a couple challenges that I think all developers need to be aware of. First off is infrastructure, right? A lot of these urban cities have very antiquated and old infrastructure, right? And so when you're building large scale communities and you need to tie into existing water or sewer infrastructure that sometimes is 100 years old, and they're pipes made out of brick and terracotta and so forth. So it's very important to understand what the existing infrastructure that you're going to need to serve your site, because if it's not adequate or there's not the capacity to do it, it can be very costly, right? And not only from costly in terms of dollars, but also time, because then you're going to have to work very closely with the various utility companies. And anyone who does real estate development knows that that can be a challenge to be able to help upgrade their facilities. Another challenge to be aware of, especially in, what you see that in Atlantic City is, that's the salt water. This is the fresh water. Many of our current developments are along the riparian matters with the Delaware River. And so we have a lot of flood hazard issues, right? We have to be a certain number of feet above the DEP requirements. And so all of our communities are required to be elevated pretty far out of the ground. There's a cost and an engineering cycle associated with that. Furthermore, there's a lot of environmental problems in urban areas, right? Many of our sites have what they call historic fill. They have the PCBs. They have underground storage tanks. They have foundations that have just been demolished and then backfilled. And so it's very important in urban areas to really understand what type of your infrastructure, your environmental, and your permitting process. What we've talked about from the onset of this conversation is the coordination, because what's beautiful about the city of Camden is whether you're dealing with the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs, whether you're dealing with the Department of Environmental Protection, the New Jersey Housing and Mortgage Finance Agency, New Jersey American Water, on and on and on. What the city does is brings all those stakeholders together, and Mayor Vic Karstafen has been the leader, and Tamika knows this. He calls everything Team Camden, right? You've never met a mayor who is just so humble in terms of how he approaches leadership in this city. And so Team Camden encompasses all those stakeholders that you need to build a new school, you need to build a new residential community, you need to build a new hospital. And when it becomes a priority, and everything we're talking about, Michael, here is a priority when you're talking about schools and hospitals and housing. When we deal with these problems, we deal with them together. and not alone. And I think that's the differentiator here, is the amount of support available to work through problems is incredible, and leads back into the predictability of a real estate developer. We want to know when we're allocating resources and time and capital that there's predictable outcomes. And when you have leadership from mayor and city council and Dana over at the Camden Community Partnership, it just leads to great outcomes. And so that's what's, I think, makes the city. And again, we develop in cities all across the country. We're in 50 different states. And what makes Camden special is how everybody comes together to problem solve and not create barriers.
Well, it's interesting. Camden, to your point, is very unique. And to Mika's point, it's kind of, I would say, frustrating. It shouldn't be unique in the sense that it should be happening in all of urban centers, right? I guess that's my frustration, right? That cooperation should be, you know, symbiotic with every other urban area, and some do, some don't, right? I mean, look at Trenton has had some significant challenges. Obviously, half their rateable base is the public sector, right? So that's problematic. But Patterson has had historic troubles. Union City has been on transitional aid for a while, right? So, our cities have these challenges. And I think, even us that live in the suburbs, I think we want our cities to do well, right? I mean, obviously for us on this side of South Jersey, Atlantic City is a huge economic engine. Clearly in Camden County, the success of Camden City does reverberate to the suburbs. So if you live in Haddon Heights or Cherry Hill or whatever, you still want the cities to succeed. And sometimes I think a lot of us, or a lot of folks, pit suburban versus urban. And it's like, well, rising tide lifts all boats, folks. Why don't we help everybody? And everybody deserves good quality housing. And I think, Nick, you brought up the great points about I know people sometimes groan, the historically disadvantaged communities, but really Camden is a historically disadvantaged community. Obviously, it dealt with significant environmental issues. Obviously, just they dealt with issues that a Cherry Hill did not deal with, right? And you have to account for that and have that predictability and help them. And I think DCA being able to come in and move projects quicker, quite frankly, or get your permitting moving along, that helps business guys like you, and certainly Tamika, when you're dealing with folks in nonprofit capacity to try to be involved in a philanthropic level. You want to make sure that the business community is helped out, frankly. Not that you're giving away the store, but it should be a little easier to build and to induce housing and all that sort of stuff. I mean, so what do you guys see? I mean, you look at first summer or winter, I believe, with no homicides. That was good. Obviously, you have a lot of projects going on now. I mean, we look at 2025. We're only a couple months removed from 2025. Was there anything kind of big that stood out that year that really was special? A new project came on board, something that's in the works now? Anything that stands to mind? Kind of, we had the history, now present term. Anything that really stood out over the past year?
I mean, the investment Coriel made, I mean, you're just really starting to back to us kind of. I think what's great about Camden is that it knows where its roots are, right? It's the residents and it's eds and meds, and then housing, right? And the schools and the public safety. And so when you're seeing more investment from when Cooper Hospital and the massive expansion now they have on campus, plus at the Walter Rand Institution, where the governor committed $250 million to make this a transportation hub. You see Coriel with another extensive financial commitment in research and development. You see Virtua Health, who bought Our Lady of Lourdes, which is right by that Oliver Station. They're making massive $100 million plus investment. The parks. I mean, I when Tamika was speaking, I mean, I would challenge any listener here to go to the Whitman Park Landing Square area and go visit the Uncommon School there and look across at the park there as well. I mean,
They call us the Park City. You know that, right? They call us the Park City. Everyone comes here to look at the parks.
Yeah. So to Tamika's point, like, and last year was like the year of more investment in parks. So you think about that, a shameless plug for Michael's. We're spending about $250 plus million in the transformation of the oldest public housing community in Camden City and Ablett Village. Oliver Station just came on board, which was the first ever South Jersey kind of integration of world-class healthcare and senior living. We just finished Branch Village, which was the transformation of Camden City's second oldest public housing community. So We're going to start the transformation of the remaining public housing in Camden City, which are the senior towers there, which there's 3 different. And so you really start to see right now, reinvestment in kind of existing obsolete housing to just state of the art, brand new housing. You couldn't tell the difference between whether it's market or affordable. And to D'Amica's point about mobility, all these communities are built with various brands of income restrictions. So there's market rate, there's workforce, and there's affordable. And so the idea is that all existing residents have the opportunity to live in new homes. Those that are working at all these new businesses that are moving to the city have an opportunity. And those that are the surgeons and the principals at Tamika schools that are making it, a very nice living, they can live there as well. So it's really thinking about kind of equitable communities that provide a broad range of rental and income limits across these new developments.
I would add that I'm really excited about the announcement that was made. I think late in 2025, just about the expansion, the commitment of, I believe, 2,000 new homes in the city. I think $18 million. Nick, correct me if I'm wrong. $18 million was committed to the city to build affordable and market rate housing. And so for me, that's really exciting. Again, when you have stable housing, the stability around mobility and the schooling, if kids moving around, really decreases, and so to have that commitment from the city, from the mayor's office, that they're going to build and focus on developing homes, brings only uplifts the community that's here, but then also the opportunity to bring in new folks into our community as well.
Well, it's funny you mention that because I think it's good, especially what do I know? I'm just a schmuck that runs a think tank, but the having that mix of market rate, affordable, aspiring folks that that maybe don't make enough to qualify for traditional or afford traditional market rate, but make too much to qualify for subsidized housing, right? You're kind of in that sandwich area. And just having that mix of folks kind of cohabitating together is a good thing. Because I think oftentimes you see in urban planning that, there is segregation, right? Where just, here's your Section 8, here's and just you've got all these clusters, especially with education. To me, I mean, it's no secret that unfortunately New Jersey, even though New Jersey has the best education system in the country, it also has some of the most segregated education systems, most segregated school districts in the country. And that's not throwing stones at anything. It's just this idea of I think our kids would benefit by having more diverse, classmates and having empathy for others that don't look like us or sound like us. Because I think that's good for all of us. That here's Camden, you've got a vibrant African American community, Latino community, and everybody in between. And how can we tackle that where you have to Nick's point, folks living together and cohabitating in communities and neighborhoods, and all at the same time making sure kids have real opportunities to kind of be in diverse settings because there's a lot of not a lot of good stuff out there in the ecosystem, from racism and xenophobia, and how can we counteract that from a pretty young age, quite frankly. One thing I want to ask too, I know it's we talk about development, it's come up, and I was even going to talk about this, but I think it's worth bringing up. There's been a lot of development going on in Camden, which is great. One of the things that you hear some antagonizers say on social media as well, we want to make sure those jobs may not be getting to the residents, or that success is going to certain class of folks, but longtime residents aren't getting that, and I think we try to break down that misnomer. So Tamika, you've lived there your whole life. I mean, what do you say to that? That well, it's only folks on the waterfront, it's only this
Yeah.
group, but not this group. I mean, to me again, rising tide lifts all boats, and everybody,
Yeah.
it
But
is benefiting, right?
yeah, I mean, being in the nonprofit and local government, you hear those narratives, and it's not necessarily a real narrative, a real feel, but I think sometimes with the community, when we're seeing change, even though change is inevitable, when we're seeing change, we're creating these narratives that may not necessarily be true. And so, for me, what I've seen. I'm like I said, I'm always down on the waterfront. I'm doing meetings, hosting different events through One Camden. And I definitely know a host of folks that work for American Water, that work for, Michael's. They're in the community. I live in one of the Michael's facilities as well. And again, these are folks that I interact with that are our front desk folks, that are our managers. They live here in the city. And so again, a lot of times when folks are just hearing, they're not really physically in the environment, those narratives come about, and we've seen this not only in Camden but just in other urban communities where you would, gentrification is the word that they'll use. Oh, we're not getting the opportunities, we're not getting the housing. But I think Camden has done a really good job on, one, being transparent about, there's a report that goes out on how many folks from Camden actually hold positions. So the city has been very active in being transparent, providing data. But then also we have, we collaborated with institutions like Camden Works, and they get the different employment opportunities and they post those out. And then we also have, just different hubs where folks can learn about the different opportunities, and also to get them prepared for the different skills, right? And so I think a lot of times there's a disconnect with the skill set versus the need. And so what Camden has been successful in doing is being able to get folks skilled up, so that they can also get these different job opportunities. Again, it's not just on the waterfront, it's throughout Camden City. I think folks focus a lot on the waterfront, but our city is comprised of different neighborhoods with their different own characters, right? North Camden has their own character. South Camden waterfront has their own character. All of these different communities and neighborhoods, they all, just come together as one. But if you visit each neighborhood, they all have their own culture and climate. And so again, I think that these narratives, because the waterfront is the waterfront, and we have these bigger institutions there, we have bigger institutions, Holtec and Reworld, and they're not along the waterfront. Campbell's Soup is not along the waterfront. Subaru, not along the waterfront. And these are where people, our folks, are getting jobs. We can do better as far as, again, preparing them, and giving them those skills. But I think, again, the mayor, the Camden community has, been able to kind of bring folks together to make sure that folks have access to these opportunities as well.
Yeah, you have to redevelop an entire city and help an entire city. If you just pick one neighborhood and not the other, I mean, people walk, people drive. I mean, these imaginary lines of wards or precincts or districts, it really doesn't matter, right? So, to your point, just the entirety of a city and urban center is important. So,
They
so
take away, again, the different specialty of the other neighborhoods. Haddon Avenue is a very popular business corridor. We have donkeys right there as well.
right.
So when we just focus on the waterfront, we take away from the rest of the city. And so I think, again, that narrative has really, we've really honed in on that narrative where we don't hear much of that. We've heard that before. And so the city has come and, again, just been very transparent, and again, just willing to collaborate with folks.
No, that's great. It's certainly, Nick. I'm always curious from a developer's perspective, and I joke. I mean, look, everybody knows my political leanings. However, I'm still a capitalist, and I want people need to make money, right? That just we're in a capitalist society. God bless, make money, give people jobs, all that sort of thing. But from your perspective, particularly in Canada, but even in general, you know, talk to us a little bit about kind of and I'll call it the community relations aspect of it, where folks, I think, especially in our politics today, have a right to be cynical, right? Can't afford your mortgage, house, gas is going up, healthcare costs are crazy, so people are naturally skeptical, right? And you see, the Amazons of the world that pay, zero in federal income tax and all that sort of thing. But so you go into a community, you're trying to, let's say you do a new housing project, a big project, the Ablett Village, I think you said it was. You go into a community and maybe there's some folks who just don't even know Michael's organization, but just they're just making money. They don't care about the community. And I'm sure you've dealt with it all over the country. What techniques and things do you do to get in the community to say no, like we're not big bad, we're legit. Hey, listen, we're all trying to make a few dollars here, but no, this is actually gonna be good for the community. Try to build that level of trust in the community, because I think I've seen, just anecdotally, just development in general, that some folks just try to go and do a project and it fails because they didn't build that trust in the community. So what do you do? What does Michael's organization do to kind of, and I think you've done it in Camden. Clearly, you're doing more work there to build that trust and try to get people to lower their guard a little bit and say, okay, I can talk to Nick. He's a regular guy just like you or me.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it. In Camden, it's a lot easier of a sale because we moved our national headquarters here, 6 years ago, and we're going to be here for another 60, 100 years, right? And so the reality there is we're not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. This is our hometown, and so being able to talk to a resident, being able to talk to a community leader about potential development and how we can design it and how we can build it and how we can engage local hires and how we can structure a community benefit program that really helps lift up the entire neighborhood. It's frankly an easier conversation because they can get in their car and drive 2 blocks and come meet me and talk about it, right? When you're working in cities outside of your hometown, it really comes back to your track record. It comes back to your reputation. It comes back to talking to other community leaders, talking to other residents, talking to other mayors, talking to other leaders, leaders in that respective neighborhood. Did Michael's do what they said they're going to do, right? And I always say this, I laugh. People say, well, you bought that. I said, I go into Amazon or else, and I read the reviews. I want to know what people are saying about the product. I want to know what people are saying about Michael's when they're in a neighborhood and they build somewhere. Do they do what they say they're going to do? Do they build high quality communities? Do they respond to resident concerns? And I tell everybody, I'm not perfect. I make mistakes every single day, right? I'll be open about it. I'll work to solve, but I'm going to make mistakes, right? And I know everybody I work with makes mistakes, right? But we're going to do our best. I'm going to give it everything I got, and we're going to do something special together. But it's not easy, right? Everything that's worthwhile is uphill. I say it all the time. You want to redevelop, everybody goes, oh, it's so cool. I would love to do what you do for a living. And listen, as I get older, I love mentoring. I love having younger generations. I want to teach them because I want them to build the next community. But Tamika, I know every day, we're dealing with problems, right? You're in late meetings, you're getting calls on the weekends. I mean, I'm just at my daughter's lacrosse game and I got 6 calls, and listen, because I care. People know that. I think you can tell very quickly when you interact with somebody if they are authentic or not. And at the end of the day, I think, we really care about the city. We care about any community that we're developing in. And we're people. I tell all the time, I'm in a people business. I don't develop housing. I develop, opportunities to lift people's lives. And that's it, right? The sticks and bricks are what they are, but that's what we are. We are in a people business. And I think when they understand where your moral compass and where it points to, it's easier, right? And you can talk to anybody and find out pretty quickly whether or not you think they actually care about the person or they care about the profits. And, I always say there's a lot of, and I know it sounds very cliche, but there's a double bottom line here, right? And the reality is if we take care of the residents, we take care of the community, the real estate will take care of itself.
Nick, you guys have it's called Better Tomorrows. I only know this because a lot of my peers have either worked through there or they've gone through that program. And so I find a lot of connection through the Better Tomorrows program with the residents. And that's how they were able to, did I hit something? I'm sorry. And that's how they've been able to kind of build out not build out, but to trust the system and kind of being a part of Michael's. You guys have a couple of programs through Michael's, again, that I spoke about that residents have access to, whether it's a job or just helping out on a nonprofit side. But Better Tomorrows, like I said, it was one of the programs that stuck out to me that has been like a vehicle in building trust with the residents and Michael's.
Yeah, no, Tamika, well said. I'm going to hire you to be my hype person on other interviews. But Tamika's right. So every community that we own and operate, we have a social service arm that provides various empowerment services. Whether the resident needs help with job mobility, or they need after school care, or they need healthcare at any facet, what after school programs, et cetera. And so we understand that, back to the point about we're in a people business, right? It's a holistic opportunity to address all facets of those lives, and we want to help them thrive. Right, that's the whole idea. Somewhere on the shirt, you'll see, lifting lives, right? And that doesn't just mean a nice roof over your head. It's how can we help address some of the insecurities in your life, some of the gaps, and that's what Better Tomorrows does. Is they'll assess the overall resident through a case management program, and then we will fill those gaps, right? And then the secondarily, we always say, listen, if you give somebody a fish, they'll eat for a day, but you teach them to fish, they'll eat for their life. And so we think that the best investment we can make in anyone that has the biggest returns is education. And so we give out a couple $100,000 a year just in Camden City to residents. And this year, we're actually going to start opening it up to non-residents to help bridge that affordability gap to go to college. And so, again, back to the people businesses. Yeah, we develop housing, but the idea, we're there to help support families, help to support seniors, help support those that, have physical and mental needs. And so that's really the business we're in. And when we take care of people, again, the real estate takes care of itself.
Yeah, I think again, it's just the intersectionality of all these issues. I think the third party validation, to your point about building the trust. I mean, Tamika says, "Oh no, Michael's is good because X, Y, and Z." We're trying to improve. Take a risk or do a big bold thing on the education side. Nick goes and says, "Hey, one Camden's good," or you have your social coordinators in your building. Somebody moves in and says, "Well, I need to get my kid into a good school." Well, you got to talk to Tamika. That's the person you got to talk to. This idea of the intersectionality of everything is so important. And I think to your point, it's just, we've seen housing projects in other areas that they build it a couple years from now, the occupancy rate goes down, it becomes run down. It's just a hunk of wood and concrete and steel, and it didn't really do much to revitalize community or to help kids, most importantly. So what are we looking at? Obviously, we're almost at the beginning, or by the time this airs, it'll be in May. We're breezing through 2026. What are we looking at? Next 2-3 years in Camden City. Obviously, got great momentum. I mean, what are some challenges that may face? Is there anything that could be done from a policy level to help either continue to make things more business friendly as a climate, to certainly improve our education? Anything that and I'll joke, any policymakers listening in Camden, turn it off, mute it. We'll talk for a second. But anything you see, kind of challenges, opportunities next couple of years that we need to jump or we need to watch out for, quite frankly.
Nick, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, from a policy perspective, and I know that we're, I think, on the third version of it, but the New Jersey Aspire program through the New Jersey Economic Development Authority recently included Camden City as what they call a government restricted municipality. And so the reality is having support from the state financially in certain regards to help create development opportunities that are financially feasible. I'm sorry.
I think that's keep going. I think it was Tamika. I muted her for a second.
Yeah. So, from an opportunity perspective is levering that program to whether it's housing development, whether it's expansion in the eds and meds, new businesses coming to the city is important, is extraordinarily important. And, I'm hearing that program is going to continue to be supported by Governor Mikey Sherrill, who was recently here last week in the city for CamCare, who's providing visits for new mothers and fathers and so forth. So huge opportunity there. And so any other folks interested in development in the city, really dive into the New Jersey Economic Development Aspire program. I think that's going to be a game changer. And then really where we're kind of focused on right now is back to the idea of different mobility in housing is really the home ownership. And so we have a lot of rental homes there at market rate, workforce, and affordable. But the idea of bringing, home ownership opportunities to the city starting in 26 and beyond. And we're building a home ownership development right now with the St. Joe's Carpenters Society right on Elijah Perry Park there in Centerville. And we're talking about close to 100 homes in downtown, waterfront, and really think about how we can expand that into the different neighborhoods from a housing perspective. And then, hey, listen, I think rooftops drive like boutique development, cafes, et cetera, in the downtown. And so really thinking intentionally about where stakeholders could develop mixed income rooftops and apartments in certain strategic areas throughout the city to drive more bodies into the city, allow residents who are looking to move into newer homes in different neighborhoods, into those homes, and just really thinking about continuing to develop more housing, because the reality is Camden City, as you said, Michael, and what Tamika is doing with the schools, like I get calls all the time, wow, like I'm hearing great things. And when you have great schools, you have great jobs, you have public safety, like people want to live in these cities. And so it's just, I get the chills just thinking about how Camden's time, you used to always say, oh, it's coming. Like we're here now, and we're going to build new housing right in, market rate, and people are already talking about moving into them in, the $300,000 to $400,000 range plus. And so, I would just empower anyone who's considering about making an investment into Camden. It's safe. You have great schools. You have great business here. You have good jobs. And so, really think about it and do it now.
Man, if you're not fired up, folks, by hearing that, I tell you what, if you had a donate now button for something in Canada, I'd be doing it right now on my debit card. You're exactly right, Nick, about the Aspire program. It's critically important. I know, and my friends in Monmouth County will get mad at me, but get mad at me. One, we don't want a casino there, but two, Netflix is getting up to $400 million in tax credits for the Netflix Monmouth at Fort Monmouth. Which, hey, God bless them, more power to them. But give us a chunk of that for economic development here in South Jersey. Especially that continue the great work, because like you said, people are ringing up the phone now. Hopefully, we get to a position where Atlantic City's like that, but that wasn't the case 15 years ago, right? Nobody was calling, and certainly no one was investing in Camden without those tax credits. And I know some folks get tax credits get a bad name, but we've got to be competitive, right? I mean, you've got Pennsylvania's ability to do business, and they're competitive, even Delaware and New York, and the idea that we're not just looking at the state in and of itself, or our neighbors around the Northeast are trying to steal our business and take our business away. And how do we keep good developers like Michael's and other groups staying here and doing great work in the state of New Jersey? Because if they're not, this isn't Pennsylvania for it; it's South Jersey for it. That's the way we look at it. Tamika, what are we looking at the next couple of years in terms of your perspective? Obviously, great improvements in the education system in Camden. And it's all about the kids, right? We've got to get help our kids, get them early. I know there's been a lot of talk about the summer slide, and obviously, we even get a chance to touch on COVID. That's probably a whole nother topic of how that really, the closing of schools really affected our young people in a negative way, to be totally frank with you. But where do you see kind of Camden's improvements in education 2, 3, 4 years from now? Any opportunities, anything coming up that we should be watching for?
Well, yeah, we're definitely looking at early childhood. I think it's big investments in our pre-K community. But what I would say is Camden's story is still being written overall. And what gives me hope is that we continue to build these systems that are inclusive of our families, that center in our families, and how we're designing these systems, including One Camden. And then also just looking at the different options. Again, it's not about this school being better than this school or this opportunity. I think it's just empowering our families, empowering our residents, laying the options out in front of them, helping them to navigate, so that we can continue to see growth in education. Again, when we have stabilization in housing, when we have a safe community, when people feel safe, they feel like they're a part of the community, then collectively we're going to grow. So I am just excited to continue to see the growth, and continue to see our families and our residents a part of the decisions that's happening in Camden, and also just having the access to those opportunities just overall. Like I said, we're not at the end. We've definitely progressed, but we still have more work to do in the city here, and so I'm just excited that we're here at this moment in 2026. But again, we have more work to do. Our story is still being written. So watch out, folks, for Camden City. There's more to come.
I love it. Listen, I could talk to y'all for quite a long time on this, but your respective families would love to see you for dinner, so I won't hold it too much. But really appreciate it. A wonderful conversation. Just to wrap up, Tamika Mason, how can folks connect with One Camden? How can they connect with you on social? Plug away. How can we learn more about you?
Yeah, so just stay connected with us on social media, on YouTube, on our website. Visit our website at onecamden.org. And we're happy to assist. We're 24/7. We have a hotline as well, 856-536-3999. But we're always welcoming our families to help them navigate the system, but then also our community partners, whether it's here in Camden or our surrounding areas.
Nick Cangelosi, somebody watching this says, you know what, that guy Nick, I think he can build some housing development. How can they get in touch with you? How can they get in touch with Michael's organization? Can they stay in touch with all of the great work you're doing?
Yeah, so visit our website, www.tmo, as in the Michaels Organization, tmo.com. Feel free to Google me and show up on LinkedIn. You can send me a direct message. I swear I do look at them at times. I know folks will send them, and it takes me some time to respond, but I do look at them. And you can always email me at ncangelosi, so NCANGELOSI at tmo.com.
Well, that's great. And I would just say, just don't spam Nick or Tamika. No Nigerian princes asking for $1 million Bitcoin, but good stuff. If you have any ideas, and again, everybody stay in touch with us, southjerseyforward.org. We had a great conversation here. All of our past research is online. We're going to have another virtual roundtable in a few weeks with the Chemistry Council of New Jersey. So we're really excited about that. Hopefully, some of their members can grow in South Jersey and get some good tax credits there to grow. But thank you so much, everybody, for listening, and really appreciate Tamika and Nick for joining us. It was a great conversation.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Mike.
Mike.
Enjoyed it.
See you, Nick.
So-
Good one, everyone.